Solving rational and radical equations. When solving radical equations, here are the 4 steps that we need to follow. First of all, we're going to isolate the radical. So anything that's outside of it, we need to move to the other side by adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. Second, we need to raise each side to an exponent. So if your radical is a square root, then we would raise each side to the second power, because that is the inverse operation of square roots. If your radical is a cube root, so there's a 3 in for the index, then we would raise each side to the power of 3. Step 3, solve the resulting equation. This might be a linear or a quadratic, so you may have to factor. In step 4, check to see if your solution is excluded from the domain. So we're just going to plug our answer back in and confirm that it works. Example 1. Our first step is to isolate the radical. Right now we have x and the radical on the same side, so I'm just going to add that entire radical over to the right side so that it's on its own. The next step is to raise both sides to an exponent. Since I have a square root here, there's not a 2, but we could put one in. I'm going to raise each side to the second power. When I do that, my square root and my squared cancel out, so I'm just going to get 5x plus 24 on the right. This is a quadratic that we're going to have to solve, so I'm going to move the 5x and the 24 over to the left side so that I can factor. I'm going to set up my x with negative 24 on the top and negative 5 in the bottom. The two numbers that multiply to negative 24 and add to negative 5 would be negative 8 and 3. Since my a value is 1, or another way to say it is the equation starts with just x squared, I know that this is going to be easy factoring, so I don't have to do factor by grouping. You're welcome to if you want to, but we can just jump to x minus 8 and x plus 3. I can solve this now by setting each of those equal to 0 and solving, and we get x equals positive 8 and negative 3. Next, we will need to make sure that we check and make sure that 8 and negative 3 are correct. The way we're going to do this is we're just going to plug them each individually back into the original problem. So let's start with 8. If I plug 8 into the equation, everywhere that I see x, I'm going to get 8 minus 8, which is 0. So 0 equals 0, that works out. 8 is one of our answers. Might be our only answer. Now let's plug negative 3 back in and see if it works as well. So here we get negative 3 minus 3 equals 0, which is not true. That's false. So my only answer is x equals 8. If you answered x equals 8 and negative 3, that would be wrong. Example 2. Here we're going to have to start by getting our square root alone. So I'm going to add the 3 over. And then we're ready to raise both sides to a power. Again, since this is a square root, I'm going to square both sides. On the left, I just get 4x plus 8 because square roots and squares cancel each other out. On the right, we're going to have x plus 3 times x plus 3, so either box method or FOIL here. A lot of times I see people make the mistake of just squaring x and squaring 3, and they get x squared plus 9, which is not correct. So make sure that you're doing box method or FOIL. Combining my 3x's. And now I have a quadratic to solve since there's an x squared. So I'm going to subtract over my 4x and subtract over the 8 to get everything on the same side. And now I'm ready to factor. I'm going to set up my x and say what multiplies to 1 and adds to 2. That would just be 1 and 1. Again, this is easy factoring because it just has an x squared out front, so my factors are going to be x plus 1 and x plus 1. Set them equal to 0. In order to solve, we get x equals -1. You don't need to write it twice. Don't put x equals -1, comma -1. Now we're going to check our answer. We're going to plug -1 back into the equation and see if we get a true statement or not. And notice I'm plugging it back into the original equation, not the one where I've moved the 3 over already. So we get a true statement, -1 equals -1, so x equals -1 is my answer. If I had gotten a false statement here, then my answer would have just been no solution, because I wouldn't have had any left that would be solutions that we can use. So we get x equals -1. In example number 3, we have an exponent of a fraction going on. If you recall back a few sections ago, anytime I have a fraction in the exponent, it's actually the same thing as a radical. So we had x to the m over n. We could rewrite it as a radical, so that's why it's in this section. So what we're going to do is we're just going to raise both sides to something that will cancel out that exponent. So remember, if we raise an exponent to another exponent, a power to a power, it's multiplication. So I want something that's going to multiply to 1. In this case, it's just going to be flipping the fraction. So if I multiply both sides, if I raise each side to the 4/5, then when I do this multiplication right here, I'm just going to get 1, because 5/4 times 4/5 is 1, and it's going to cancel out to just be x on that side, which is what I want. So on the left, we just get x, and on the right, we're going to get 81. You can get that by plugging 243 to the 4/5 into your calculator. If you have a scientific calculator, that's a super easy computation to do. If you don't have a scientific calculator, let me show you how to do that by hand. So first of all, you would need to write it as a radical. So we're going to have the 5th root of 243 all to the 4th power. This is something that we did a little while ago. You may remember or you may not, but that's how we write it as a radical. Next, we're going to find the 5th root of 243. The way that we do that is we ask ourselves the question, what number to the 5th power equals 243? Just try stuff in your calculator. Try 2 to the 5th, 3 to the 5th, 4 to the 5th. You'll pretty quickly find that it's 3. So I have a 3 inside the parenthesis, and it's still 3 to the 4th. 3 to the 4th is just 3 times itself 4 times, which is 81. You don't have to show this work on the test. I'm happy with you just putting your answer like I did on the left side. But if you don't have a scientific calculator, you're going to need to know how to do that for the test.